know, it is amazing the way that God does things, and He brings people together. Our next guest was actually brought to me because of a good friend from years ago, Greg Cooper, and the passion and the call that's there that was started years ago is being stirred again. And that may be what's going on in your life as well, is that there are things, God never lets a dream die. He never lets a calling die. It says in Romans chapter 11, the gifts and callings of God are irrevocable. In other words, God never takes them back. And He challenges you and He stirs them up and He does things in the right time. Many of you that are watching are familiar with the fact that I've traveled around the world and we've battled human trafficking in places like Moldova and Thailand and other places around the world where it's prevalent. And we see those images. You've seen them on 20/20 or 60 Minutes, these images of these young girls in trafficking, and you thought, wow, that's so far away. But did you know it's happening right here in the United States? Did you know that it's happening right in Pittsburgh, in Cleveland, in Columbus, in Atlanta, in LA? All these places it's happening today. And our guest today, Brian Shivler, heads up an organization called Resolution Hope, and he is helping to fight that good fight. Brian, glad to have you with us, buddy.
Oh, it's great to be here.
Oh, it's always good to have you, man. It's good to be around you. You're an encouragement, even though you're battling such an intense thing. I mentioned at the beginning of the program about the 13th Amendment, about the abolition of slavery, but it still is going on today.
Yeah, it is. And staggering amounts here in the United States, as you mentioned, and it took me a while to really wrap my head and my heart around the fact that this was true, because I, have spent some time traveling around the world, and I've seen these kinds of things, and they're appalling, and we know how dishonoring to God that it is, and I just never realized it was happening here in the United States, to the tune of, our best estimates now tell us there just was a congressional hearing where they're talking about 100,000 American girls that are entrapped in this net in the United States.
We need to, and I don't like to, just kind of blow things up and say, wow, this is how bad things are, but we need to let people understand just how bad the situation is. When we're talking about human trafficking in the United States, what are we talking about?
Well, you're talking about a segment of criminal who has made their living for many years off of dealing drugs. Mm-hmm. Child trafficking, human trafficking in the United States is now estimated to be the second largest criminal revenue source behind illegal drug sales. And it fights with illegal weapons sales for that second position, which is appalling. The estimates worldwide are in the tens of billions of profits produced. The last number I read was $32 billion around the world of profits annually from human trafficking. And here in the United States, the estimates are something like $27 million a year. So the numbers are staggering, and as we speak to our friends and folks that we're trying to educate about this, and that's our mission, is awareness of this, as you know. It's interesting that people kind of work their way through these thought processes with their mind and their heart. The first thing you can see kind of goes through their mind is, okay, I heard something about this happening in other places around the world, places I may have never been, as you described, far away. But I would have trouble believing that this is really happening here in the States, because wouldn't I see it? And the fact of the matter is that the news channels, national news channels have all covered this story, Tim, as you know. ABC and NBC and America's Most Wanted, they're all helping by bringing awareness to what's happening here in the States. It's pretty appalling. It's
one of those things where we get almost news weary and we kind of tune out. It was funny when I brought up the idea of this project and helping with Resolution Hope with our leadership team. They were all in agreement. They're like, okay, we're gonna do this. Tim, you feel passionate about this. We're gonna do this. But it wasn't like, wow, this is really a serious issue, until the very next day. There was a news story about a young girl that had been kidnapped, on the streets of Pittsburgh.
Right.
They're like, wow, this does happen here. This happens here. And then all of a sudden it's like, wow, we need to do something.
And people are under the impression, too, that, you would think about some major metro hubs like LA and New York and Chicago, and naturally you think, well, I'm sure that kind of thing could happen there in those dark suburbs or the dark urban areas. The fact of the matter is, this is a crime that spreads all across America. It's urban, yes. It's suburban, absolutely. It's even out in the rural areas now. And our biggest fear is if it keeps growing unchecked at the alarming rate it is, then there's just no telling where it will end. And we know that God's had enough of this. To watch him calling his soldiers, the people that hear about this, and say to us, I've got to step up, tell me how I can help you, has just been amazing to see God order our steps to bring resources to the table to help with this.
I want to bring a little bit of reality to the scenario. We have you did an interview with a police officer in Atlanta that describes what some of these girls go through on a basis, why they're held in this place, and do you want to say anything to kind of set this up?
Yeah, well, we were getting ready for New Year's Eve, which we'll talk about in a moment. We were taping some interview segments in Atlanta. The great thing about Atlanta is they had some really motivated politicians. They had some really motivated law enforcement people, healthcare providers, who, as they started to learn about what was happening there in Atlanta, really took an active step in bringing an end to that. So this interview segment, the thing that, Tim, that really struck me about this was this gentleman who's a detective in Fulton County. He does this for a living. And he even was just absolutely appalled by what he found.
I don't know if you're ready for this, but get ready, because you're not going to believe what you're going to hear from this detective in Fulton County, Georgia.
We got an anonymous call just from a concerned citizen that overheard a conversation that that was a young girl that was beaten real badly and that was held against her will in a dog cage. I received a phone call from the crime suppression unit that said they got an idea of where this young child may be. She may be at the 6th floor of this hotel. I immediately responded to the location with that unit. We met with management, and we told management exactly what we was dealing with, and that we need to check every room on the 6th floor because that's maybe a child in danger. Management did assist us as far as getting to the rooms, but they didn't tell us all the information in which they known about what was actually going on. We go up to the 6th floor, and we start checking from room to room. We was on one end of the hallway going to the other. And then finally, we knocked on the door, and the guy answered the door, and he cracked open the door, and he was one of the guys that we have identified as a pimp in the Fulton Industrial Corridor. And when we looked, you can see that there was a female sitting on the bed, and she was beaten so badly that you cannot see the white of her eyes. Her eyes were swollen shut. You can still see trickles of blood coming from the top of her head. She had her hair in a braided hairstyle, but on the floor you can see parts of her hair and the braids that was on the floor. There was 4 to 5 other girls that was inside this stable. The number 1 girl, and she was actually the number 5 girl. They took turns brutally beating her while the pimp sat back and watched. She was beaten in the head with the Hennessy bottle. Her braids were pulled out. And then at the end of the day, they took a picture of her and threw her in a cold shower. And the pimp took a picture of her and passed it around to other pimps to let them know that this is what happened when you try to leave me. And at some point during that night, they had a pit bull. They took the pit bull out of his kennel and put him inside of the bathroom, and she was placed inside the dog kennel, the cage.
This is America, folks. This is not some foreign Southeast Asian nation. This is the United States of America. This is Atlanta, Georgia. I mean, unbelievable, Brian.
It is unbelievable. In the land of the free and the home of the brave. And Detective Randolph he's an amazing human being who has just dedicated his life to to helping these girls, and all that was done to that girl. She had been kidnapped, brought into, you heard him refer to as the stable. This is what these pimps call the girls that they keep, and the little girl ran away. And what happened was she ran. She called a man who she thought was a friend of hers to help her, and that man called the pimp and collected money from him to take him with her when he went to pick her up. The pimp brought her back to the hotel room and basically, unleashed the other girls on her for fear of all of their lives.
Folks, it's just a taste of what's going on out there. And I don't want you to be hopeless, because in a couple minutes here, we're going to be talking about what you can do to make a difference, and that there is a difference being made, and that Brian and Resolution Hope are making a difference, and you can actually participate in something that will help make a difference. But you might think that it's really all these, evil, pervert type characters that you hear about, stalking children in parks and things like that are doing this. But we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about who it is that's involved in these type of things. You may be surprised. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back to Focus 4, and we're dealing with a pretty intense subject, but something that, you can make a difference. It's human trafficking here in the United States. And with me on the program is Brian Shivler from Resolution Hope. And Brian, we saw the clip. The police officer was talking about what happens to these young girls if they try to run away.
Yeah.
How many in the United States are we talking about are at risk?
Well, there's 300,000 girls now that the Department of Health and Human Services would put in the high-risk category. And the way they arrive at that number, Tim, is there are an estimated 455,000 girls that run away from home in the United States every year.
Nearly 500,000 girls.
Yeah, and the National Runaway Hotline reports that a third of those girls tell them that they were being sexually abused at home by a friend, a family member, or someone that they know. So what's happening is these girls are often running from a toxic environment at home out into the streets where they believe they're safe. And these traffickers are very, very savvy. Mm-hmm. They have a network of people. They use the drug dealing network to keep their eyes on the street. And when there's a girl that shows up who is not usually out on the street, somebody gets a call to go and find that girl. And mm-hmm. typically they come alongside her and, let her know that there's someone there that does care about her and that they can provide shelter, and that's how the whole thing starts. And you arrive at this point where, again, our best estimates are that there are 100,000 American girls caught in this mess.
So we've got young girls that are broken because of what they've gone through. They've run away, most likely because the family members know about the brokenness. It's not a big splash in the news. It's like, okay, the problem has gone away. And so these girls are left on the streets. Somebody comes alongside and says, listen, you know what, I can help you. I can give you food, shelter. I can provide you with some money, and you can make
and
it better.
And I love you.
Yeah.
And this is one of the big catches, because a lot of these girls are growing up in environments where they have not had a male figurehead who has really cared for them in a way that's biblical. And so there's this facade initially posted by these men and women pimps to lure these girls into believing. Sometimes they take months, Tim, to groom these girls by taking care of them and getting them food and shelter and taking them shopping, and then all of a sudden
that you owe me.
things start to change. Well, you can't just stay here for free, and I bought you all these things. And the girls are young. You know, the average age of a girl that's caught in this trafficking net is 13 years old.
13 years old.
Yeah, 12 to 14 is
Folks,
the average age.
think about your daughter, your granddaughter. I mean, think 13 years old. Can you imagine? 13 years old, broken, on the street, and some predator comes along and says, you know what, I'll take care of you. Where else are they going to go? Brian, you come from a business background. You were doing well in the business field, had it made, got to travel, got to do all these kind of things. Why this? What jerked your world around to get you involved in this?
Well, I think my story is not dissimilar to yours or anyone else's in that God called me. I spent in the consulting world hundreds of airplane rides, sensing that God had something for me to do and looking out the window praying. And it really wasn't until last summer, just about this time, I was serving full-time in our church, and God just started to put the pieces together to really break my heart for this in particular. And so I resigned from that position at the church, and we started Resolution Hope, and to focus on what's happening here in the United States, to help organizations that are on the streets working with these girls to rescue them, to build restorative homes for these girls. It's such a complex psychological issue, Tim. We've got to get to this problem before it happens. God just firmly laid on my heart that anything that can be done educationally for families, for health care, to stop this problem before it starts is where we need to get to. And of course, the demand has to be addressed, because there are millions of men in America that are caught in the sin of pornography and the use of prostitution. And God can step in and heal them of that sin, as you know.
Where there's darkness, the scripture says, he will cause his light to shine. And the greater the darkness, the greater the light. And with just what you were saying there, if there wasn't a demand for this industry, it would not exist. And we think, we get in our minds this picture of this, as we would call, pervert, stalking the school and things like that. But it's really not that. You talked to a young woman who was talking about who these people are. Jennifer.
Yeah. Jennifer's a great young woman. We interviewed her when we were doing the segment down in Atlanta. And it isn't who you would think it is. It's the people that you work with. It's the person sitting beside you in the coffee shop. These men are every man in America that you could take a snapshot of. And it unfortunately, it doesn't fall anymore into the world of some guy who's dealing with, an illness. It's through Hollywood and through, our culture. The gray zone has gotten bigger and bigger, and it's all around us now.
The porn industry has stolen a lot of men's innocence and focus. It used to be you had to go into a store somewhere in some back alley to get, and it's driving men. We know psychologically that men need two things. They need sex and they need respect. And they will get those things, one way or another if they're not getting it, and it drives them. And Jennifer just tells this story of who these men are.
The men who purchase sex with adolescent girls aren't just the creepy pedophiles in the park. In 2009, we commissioned the Georgia Demand Study, which showed that 7,200 men purchase sex from adolescent girls each month, knowingly and unknowingly, here in Georgia. One of the main key things from that is that out of that study, almost half, 42% of the 7,200 men that purchased sex gave their location of north of Interstate 285, which is a very affluent, very suburban community. And so for us, if we really want to stop the prostitution of children, we have to look at this and cut off the demand for this. Because it's the third largest money-making business here in our country, we have to look at it as an economics issue. And when you take away the demand for a product, what happens to the supply? It goes down. So our agency at A Future Not the Past, and what we're doing, we're really looking at the buyers and how can we urge community members to look at and hold them equally as accountable, because the victims grab our heart. The victims are what wakes me up in the morning and keeps me working and keeps me going. But if we don't get angry at the men who are allowed to buy and sell the children, then we'll never stop the problem. And we have to begin doing that. And what we found out from the Georgia Demand Study is that there is this willful ignorance by the caller, who will not necessarily say that I want an underage girl, but he'll call in and he will dance around the age. And I want one young and very young. So we knew very early on in that research study that we needed to put some indicators in that phone call, because we wanted to know what we were really up against when we're talking about Johns, when we're talking about buyers. And anybody who knows me knows that I hate the word John. I know a lot of nice guys named John, and it's not okay that we get to call men who buy sex from kids John, but the girl gets called a prostitute. The girl has to wear labels. She's called a whore. She's called a slut. And that's not acceptable, because the guy who purchased her is not a nice guy named John.
Just using the rough statistics there, 2 out of every 100 men in Atlanta are using underage girls as prostitutes. I mean, it's unacceptable. Any is unacceptable, but it's crazy. It's crazy, Brian. Well, this is a lot of bad news. We've been giving people a lot of bad news, but we want to give them the good news. So when we come back, we're going to give you some good news about what you can do, the impact that you can have, an event that's taking place, and the way that lives can and will be changed because of you. We'll be right back after this.
Pray and vote. The course of our nation rests in the hands of America's voters. Join us as we pray for the selection of our national leaders. Pray that our citizens will make responsible, educated decisions about the candidates. Pray for Christians to shake off indifference and act as salt and light in our society, that they will humbly seek God for the healing and direction of our nation. Our elected leaders will make policies and decisions based on their beliefs. So pray that Christians will vote for those candidates who will stand for biblical values. Pray for the candidates that their true character and stances on the issues are accurately portrayed. Pray for the media to be fair and unbiased in their coverage. Pray and vote. As St. Augustine once said, pray as though everything depended on God. Work as though everything depended on you. This has been a message from your Cornerstone family.
It can seem overwhelming. Actually, I need to correct my statistic, because I included women in my division there. So it'd really be like 4 out of every 100 men in Atlanta are using young girls for prostitution, and it's just crazy. It's just crazy, and it seems like this is so overwhelming.
Yeah.
That there's nothing we can do, but there are things we can do.
Sure, there are. The first thing is, you can pray. There's nothing that anybody is going to do that's more important than praying for our government, praying for resources, praying for these girls that are in so much trouble, praying for the men that are caught in this loop of using pornography and prostitution, and for the men that are holding these girls, that God will convict them of their sin. But there are also some very practical things. We have an event coming up on New Year's Eve, as you know, that's really exciting.
And I want to talk about that in a minute, but I want to talk about what one person did. When you went to Atlanta, you talked to a young woman named Latasha.
Yeah, Latasha.
And she didn't know anything at all about human trafficking.
Not at all.
And here's her story.
And a young girl came in crying. She was 13 years old. And she said, my cousin is missing. And just when you hear the story of a missing child, you know, we don't hear, I mean, we hear it, we see it on TV, but how many of us really have experienced that? Because anytime you see this happening to any family, they say, I never would have thought this would have happened to my child, or I never would have thought this would happen to my niece, you know. But when this is right in front of your face, you cannot turn your back. And so the young girl's mom gave me the flyer, and here I see this 13-year-old child that's missing. She'd been missing for 24 hours at this time. At that point, I didn't know what to do. But I did know that I can put this information out on social media and perhaps, you know, just spread the awareness a little bit more. So I tweeted the information, missing child in the College Park area here in Atlanta. I took a picture of the photo on the flyer, and I posted it to Twitter and Facebook. Really in the back of my mind, not thinking something would come of it, but I just wanted to do something. And I started getting calls that day, and my phone was ringing, and I didn't understand. I was getting these emails from this person that I didn't recognize. I decided to answer the phone, and it was a news reporter from the AJC that actually followed me on Twitter. I had no idea that she followed me on Twitter. And she wanted to know if there had been any media attention towards this young girl. And I knew that within 48 hours, this young girl, they were already classifying her as a runaway, but her family was saying she was not a runaway. She was 13 years old. She was an AB honor roll student. She was afraid of the dark. She never did anything like this. There was nothing in her history that would have her disappear and not call. And so I told the young lady about the story, and I told her that I would connect her with the young girl's mom. And so I made that connection, and within a few hours, AJC ran a piece on it, and then also it invoked the news. And so this young girl's picture, her mom was interviewed, her face was posted on CNN, it was on CBS Atlanta, it was on all the stations here. And a lot of times traffickers don't want young girls that other people are looking for. You know, they want the ones that no one's looking for, the ones that people have forgotten, the ones that we think that are runaways, or the ones that, you know, that have maybe social issues or different issues that they have. But this young girl was spotted, and they spotted her at McDonald's, and because of her picture being out there, they spotted her in McDonald's with a gentleman. And the workers there felt like there was two young girls with this man, and they can tell that those girls were in trouble because they made no eye contact. And probably about 3 days later, this young girl was dropped off at another McDonald's in the Fayetteville, Georgia area. And here you have a young girl who was 13 years old, AB honor roll student, was mad at her sister because she posted something on Facebook. Her sister told her she was going to get in trouble for what she posted on Facebook. She got mad at her sister, walked out her door, and was missing for 4 days.
Power of what one person can do.
Yes.
I mean, it saved that young girl's life, I am absolutely sure. But there are some things that our folks can do, because folks, I need you to understand, Cornerstone Television is partnering, working hand in hand with Resolution Hope here. We have decided to take this up, and it's to fight this fight that Brian is leading and Greg Cooper are leading in making this happen. And so Brian, what can people do?
Well, we are on New Year's Eve, as you know. This New Year's Eve happens to be the 150th year anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation, where President Lincoln began his track to abolish slavery. In 2 more years, we'll celebrate the 150th year anniversary of the 13th Amendment. So we are launching our national 13A awareness campaign to stop child trafficking in the U.S. And we're doing that this New Year's Eve. with a live concert based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, with Matthew West, Britt Nicole, several members from the Pittsburgh Symphony, Greg and Rebecca Sparks, a wonderful evening of music, prayer, worship, and we are also concurrently going to run a 2-hour television special, which will be broadcast on your network to let people know the truth about what's happening in the United States with child trafficking.
And are tickets available for that now, or how will they find out?
Tickets will be available on October 1st, and obviously here you guys will give them a listing of how they can get those tickets. And we're asking that everybody who hears about this can just go online to resolutionhope.org, watch the video. It's less than 5 minutes. And we have the 13A campaign is, what we're asking people for when we launch is 10 minutes of their time, $5 of their resources, and that they would consider telling 30 of their friends about this situation. And if we can just do that, ask folks to spend 5 minutes watching the video so that they're educated, spend 5 minutes signing the electronic note to the President of the United States, asking him to bring his resources to bear to help solve this problem, and also engage 30 of their friends to do the same. We can make a huge difference in this, because history has shown us, as you know, that awareness creates public opinion. Public opinion demands policy and law. Law must be enforced, and to enforce those laws you need resources, and that's where all of this is breaking down.
And it's not like anyone in the United States, anyone in our government wants to continue human trafficking.
No, of course not.
It's just they need the push for people in the United States and for Christians. This is where, in my opinion, Christians have to stand up and say, listen, we are going to stop this. We are going to make a difference here. We can't necessarily rely on the government or other things, but we can do this. We can help our government to understand that this is a priority. And I don't hear you saying this is a massive time commitment or a massive financial commitment. This is something someone can do it's on Facebook. They can tell
Yes.
30 friends,
Yes.
and without a problem. $5, it's not a problem.
With a total time commitment of 15 minutes. And that would include, posting something to Facebook or to LinkedIn or tweeting it, and $5, it really makes a difference, because the power is in our numbers, Tim. And this is something that, in particular, those of us that are Christians, those of us who believe in what Christ came to do for us, he was very clear about us standing together as warriors. And this, I cannot think of a darker evil to stand against.
Brian, there may be some people that are watching right now that either have children that are missing, or they have been involved in pornography, or maybe even the sex trafficking industry by picking up a girl, or they may be part of the sex trafficking industry. Would you mind just we've just got a couple minutes left in this program. Would you mind just talking into that camera, talking to those folks, and giving them the hope that they need?
Sure. If you happen to be watching today, it's not by accident. God is divine, and he has given you this new information. If you're in a position where you have been sexually abused and never talked to anyone about it, if you're in a position where you're caught in the net of using pornography or sexual services, God can heal you of that if you'll ask him to. And we're here today to tell you that the power of God circumvents any other power on earth. And this is why we have hope that we can solve this, is we have God on our side. So if you're in that situation, call the station. Call and ask someone to pray for you. Reach out to a friend. Find your pastor. Go to someone who shares your faith with you and talk to them about what you've been through, and begin the process of restoration.
Whether you are a victim or you're someone who has participated in this in some way, there is hope. That's what Resolution Hope is about. That's what Cornerstone Television is about. And if you would like to get that hope, call the number 1-888-665-4483 and say, you know what, I need hope. I need forgiveness. I need strengthening. Listen, I don't care what you're going through or what you've done. God's grace, as we talked about earlier in this program, is sufficient for you. And He loves you. He has a plan and a purpose for your life. And nothing that you've done can stop that purpose if you're willing to say, God, I just want you to just heal, restore, strengthen, and set me free. God really loves you, and I need you to understand that. If you'd like to help fight this fight with us, if you'd like to stand with Cornerstone Television and Resolution Hope, I would encourage you to go to www.resolutionhope.org and say, you know what, I want to be a part. I want to stand. I will pray. I will give. I will support in some way. I want to see an end to this. I'm a man or woman of God, and I want to see an end to this. I'm going to do something. I'm not just going to sit back and watch this problem happen. There are nearly 500,000 young girls and some young boys that are at risk that need you to stand up as a man or woman of God and make a difference. Thanks for tuning into the program, and I hope that this has caused you to think. Brian, it's been good to have you. Appreciate you being here.
It's great to be here.
And you'll be hearing more about Resolution Hope and what's coming up in the big event, New Year's Eve. We'll see you next time on Focus 4.
Cornerstone Television wishes to thank all our faithful viewers whose consistent prayers and financial support have made this program possible.